Now, if you're like me, you like to hunt anywhere that you can find deer. And I love going back to my public land hunts of Pennsylvania and Michigan every year. And I've rarely missed Michigan. I think I've hunted 20 different seasons in Pennsylvania since '93. So I've missed a few years in there, but hopefully this will be my 21st year hunting Pennsylvania. I love doing so. There's just that allure of going to public land. And what's cool about it is I often am hunting thousands of acres at one time. I'm going to look for sign. I'm narrowing down the best areas away from people. You can X off thousands of acres out of 5,000 at a time because you're getting rid of all the waterways, areas that deer don't inhabit, steep faces, people, parking areas, access roads. And so you're narrowing it down to a very small window that includes a diverse amount of habitat for the public land setting, which is few and far between. And then you're honing in on that spot. So you can take a lot of, like I've taught for many, many years, you can take a lot of acres, 10,000 acres, narrow it down to a few hundred just by Xing out all that you don't want to hunt, all that's close to the road, and then looking for those diverse locations of habitat that feature funnels, and you can narrow it down to a great place to hunt. But once you get to that point, what do you do? And the problem I see is in today's craze-filled social media world, there's a lot of aggressive public land hunting tactics that may leave you high and dry for the rest of the season. Not everyone can scout several properties in several states at a time and then go hit those locations when they feel are best, or when they feel they have time here, let's burn out that spot, burn out this spot. A lot of people have to manage those sits. And I think it boils back to length of time to hunt. If you have 3, 5, 7 days to hunt a public land parcel, you're finding those locations you want to hunt, maybe you've pre-scouted, then you hit them pretty hard. And because you have a short window, I would suggest you have multiple areas you can hunt. So if you burn one out in the first day or second day, third, you can go over to plan B or C or D. And so you really have to think, how long am I going to hunt this parcel? Because aggressive tactics are out there. And it's great. And I'll give you an example, the hunting public. They're going into a public land setting for a week at a time. I love those guys. They hit it hard. They hit it harder than anybody else. They do it week after week after week, but they're going to different locations. If you're living in a state where you're just going to hunt public land all year, well, that's fine if you have 10 locations or if you have 8 locations. Then you can afford to go into those areas, burn each one out, and just have another place to hunt. But if you're like me, you want to go into a spot, you want to manage that for the length of the season in certain locations, depending on the state I'm hunting, then I'm either going in and burning something out within a few days because I'm going to be gone anyways, or you might want to manage that public land for the length of the season so you can enjoy hunting that location for time to come. So you really have to think about the length of time you have to hunt relative to even information you see online. So say, for example, of hunting public. Again, I love those guys. I love their channel, everything they do. They're great people. But they're not often managing a certain ground of public land for 3 months, where they want to go in there and hunt it over and over again and manage those sits. Very aggressive tactics that may or may not be a fit for you, depending on the amount of time you're hunting that public land. I want to mention buck bedding right here. Buck bedding, the buck bedding craze, going and finding buck bedding. I felt bad for a friend of a friend. He was going down to the Wayne State Forest or Wayne National Forest in Ohio, over 100,000 acres, and he's looking for buck beds to hunt in the fall. That's more than a needle. That's like a needle in a haystack full of needles in a haystack. I mean, it was incredibly hard to find that, just a lot of time wasted. You're looking for major movements, major funnels, major food sources like clear cuts, and then you're hunting those funnel areas where you can get in and out. You're away from other hunters so you can find great areas to hunt, and then you don't really care where they're bedded. It really doesn't matter what knoll they're bedded on. And on top of that, their bedding areas change over and over again. So they're moving and shifting based on food sources that are popping up at the moment. Those food sources get pressured. So a buck that's bedded one spot in the first week of October, he could be bedding in 8 different spots by the end of October consistently based on the available food source, hunting pressure, and when he feels that he can get into a reclusive area. So while hunting buck bedding areas in certain types of habitats, say big marshland, where you have island you're hunting where a certain buck is going to a certain island every single day, it's just a matter of getting in there with waders and trying to wait for him to come back. But he doesn't have a lot of space. Smaller public land tracts, areas that are intermixed with suburban land next to urban areas where bucks don't have much of a choice to go bed. Well, that's different. You're hunting a buck bedding area during the fall simply because there's not a lot of cover left to even hunt them on. Those does are closer to a major food source. That buck has been back in the marsh. He only has a few high pieces of ground to even bet on. Pretty easy to find those spots, pretty easy to narrow down. That is not the same as hunting a giant national state forest where you need to be hunting movement and not bedding areas. So it's misleading a lot of people out there. The rut cruising setup, this is a little bit different. I talk about not burning out a spot. But there's a lot of those really good rut cruising setups. It's a funnel on public land. What's cool about that compared to a private land parcel, on private land, you have to manage each one of those tree stand locations. You can't burn it out because you'll burn out an area that's 200 to 300 yards around that area. You have deer that are concentrated towards food plots, water holes, mock scrapes, and movements you're trying to create, maybe habitat diverse bedding areas, diversity pockets within an open field and switchgrass. But you want those improvements to last the entire season, so you can't afford to spook them out. You can't go pound that same stand over and over again because it has a ripple effect. And on 80 acres, if you have a ripple effect of keeping deer away during the daylight hours over a 500, 6-yard area away from that stand, you're on your neighbor's property, let alone your own property. So you're hurting your entire property in a case like that. But on public land, it's different. You're going into a spot where a deer might be 2 miles away when you go into that funnel. Say a bench system, a constriction of where hardwoods meet swamp, lowland meets high, the outside corner of a clear cut where they're circling around that outside edge. Don't go out into the clear cut during the day. They're just cruising that inside edge like the inside corner of an ag field. And they're creating an exit movement. A great place to set up during the rut. You're blowing your scent back into that clear cut area, and then you get out before dark because their deer are starting to get into that clear cut area. Bottom line though, a lot of those rut cruising setups on public land you can pound over and over again during the rut because deer aren't necessarily right in that spot where you're hunting. Bedding areas could be a long ways away. Again, you don't care where the bedding area is, you're just looking for that exit funnel and movement. And so hunting that rut cruising area is a lot different, and hunting it 7 days in a row, where you could have bucks coming from a long ways away, bucks that weren't even near that location the first or second or third day. And we see that a lot on our trail cameras on public land where you're hunting there and all of a sudden for 2-3 days in a row there's a mature buck moving through. So a lot of times it's more timing, and so just putting time into that stand, completely different than private land. Weather. Do you have good weather or not? So if you're trying to manage your sits over a long period of time, hunting just like you do private land is key. Hunting the weather, making sure that you're hunting during great times, not during poor times, because you want to get the most value for that location that you're hunting. And if you have 4 or 5 locations on a big public land chunk of 10,000 acres or more, then you can manage your sits, kind of pop around, hunt when the weather is good. If you have poor weather that you have a day off and you just have to get out in the woods, then you can hunt a different location. But save those best stands for the best weather. And on public land, when you're trying to manage your sits over a long period of time, that's a great philosophy, great concept, great strategy. But again, if you have a 7-day rut window, a 9-day rut window to hunt, who cares about the weather? Just go in and hunt, beat it hard. Maybe you want to save that stand for a better day, 2 days away, and you have a second stand you can use or a third location that you can get into. But bottom line is, you just get out and hunt, maybe slant your locations based on the quality of the weather, but still you're hitting the woods every single day on public land. Follow the food. What's interesting about this is you get white oaks early, then red oak, acorns, and then as it transitions and progresses into November, December, and January, you're getting a lot of whitetails that are gravitating to not only thick cover and high stem count cover because they've been pushed around in public land, but they're looking for thermal protection and they're looking for browse quality. So areas of clear cuts, briars, areas of lots of diversity where old woods meets young cuttings, meets swampland, meets hill country, flat country, where all that comes together, then you're going to find the most browse, the most food, the most thermal protection, the highest stem count, where deer can actually go in and hide into the brush. And so where you might have hunted an open white oak stand, and I'm thinking of a southwest facing slope and in the Shawnee State Forest out in a remote area where there could be a ton of sign in October. Unfortunately, it was off from September when the acorns were coming down in those white oaks. So a lot of times you're hitting those mass crops early. There's not as much pressure in the woods. And as you transition through fall, you're really looking for other locations that have a lot of browse and a lot of diversity. And that's why you can manage your sits, because you're locating yourself in one corner of the state forest or national forest during the early season, progressing towards middle, getting into those big rut cruising locations during the rut, and then finally finding those browse areas towards the late season. And that way you can manage the life of that entire public land area by not just sitting in one spot, burning it out and wondering where the deer went. Scent matters, right? It really doesn't on public land. What you have to control is playing the wind. That means when you're on stand, that's your greatest concern. What's on your downwind side? And so I love backing up against a marsh, a steep drop off, maybe an open hardwoods where I don't expect deer to be. So you're in that funnel of movement, you're in a good diversity area, you're in a good white oak area early, red oak, maybe that brow spot or a clear cut later, but you're off to the side and you're blowing your scent into a non-deer area. That's the biggest management. A lot of times when I'm walking in an hour and 15 minutes into public land or 45 minutes, that great length of time, you get sweated up, you really don't worry about your scent other than when you're on stand. That's the greatest form of scent control anyways. You're not gonna really, especially on public land, you're not clearing a trail all the way to your stand. You're gonna have 10 other hunters following you in and getting into that location, even if it's a long ways in. So you're really learning to play the wind when you're on stand. And then what also matters, number 6 here, is a quiet, stealthy attack. That means quiet gear, quiet stand, quiet way to hunt out of a tree. And that also means height. When I'm hunting on public land and in a climber, you know, typically on private land here, I'm getting into trees that have some semblance of cover in some way. I'm usually right up around 20 feet, but I find myself on public land getting a lot higher than that, more like 24, 28 feet, 26 feet, 22, whatever it might be. But I'm getting that height because there's a lot of open hardwoods and there's a lot of open ground. And think about it, if you're 20 feet in the air and a deer is looking your direction from 100 yards away on a flat, you're virtually on the ground as far as the angle that you are in that distance. So really trying to get up as high as you can, making sure you have a lot of cover, making sure you can shoot sitting down. Very bad if you have to twist around the tree for another shot, left to right, whatever it might be. I'm really positioning so I'm facing this way. That means my shot's right here. That means as a right-handed person, I can actually cover about 180 degrees with barely having to get out of my chair, not moving at all, very quiet. I don't want to rough against any tree. And you really need to blend in. That means your body has to be pinned against the tree, flat against the tree. You can't be sticking out from that tree. You know, a lot of times it's cool to stand and you might be 2 feet away from that tree. Now your body is disconnected from that tree. It's very easy to silhouette you. Instead, I'd prefer to sit against a tree, stand against a tree. Standing makes you move a lot more. So for long sits on public land, if you can just huddle in a seated position against that tree, you're not only going to blend in a lot better, but you're going to be less fidgety. And that's one other way you can manage your stands. Has to be quiet, has to be death from above. Let them think that there's no one there. You're not 8 feet off the ground, 10 feet off the ground. Again, some of those aggressive hunting tactics can work. They can work in a very, brushy area with poor trees. You're only getting 8, 10 feet off the ground. You're hunting that really pinpoint bedding area, but let's face it, 99.9% of all whitetail hunting, you can't hunt a deer bed. It's more funnels. It's transition of poor quality habitat. You're getting out and swap and paint with every other hunter out there. You're trying to walk into a remote section of land. And if you're like a lot of people where you have to manage your sits from day 1 to day 99, then it's very important that you don't use some of the aggressive tactics that you see online. Go and burn your stand out, and then you're not included in the hunting rakes for the other 92 days out of the hunting season. I'd rather see you manage your public land sits, enjoy hunting public land the entire season, because it really does offer deer from day 1 to day 99 and offer deer opportunities. And so this is a great way to manage your public land, be efficient, and even though you don't own it, doesn't mean you can't manage not only the land, the herd that you're after, but certainly your hunt all season long. Well, I'm real excited, folks. I appreciate you watching this video, but my next web class, How to Plant Food Plots, How to Design Your Food Plot Program, is out. And it really goes through a step-by-step process for not only how to plant your food plots, but why you should plant them, where you should plant them, what you should plant, how you should create them. There's a lot of different modules. Ends up about 30 videos altogether. I urge you to check that out. We're out here completing our food plot work today, and we do that in a pretty strict pattern so we can find success this fall. Food plots shouldn't be a guessing game. Take the guesswork out of food plots and food plots planting, and check out the web classes. I have my How to Design Your Whitetail Property, the food plots for the next web class in the series, and I hope you enjoy it. I hope you check it out, and let me know what you think if you end up purchasing that, and I think you'd be well pleased that you did.